Divorce is one of the most challenging transitions in life, and without the right guidance, it can quickly turn into a disaster. Welcome to Dodging Divorce Disasters, the show that helps you navigate the legal, financial, and emotional pitfalls of divorce before they happen. In each episode, I sit down with a top professional in the divorce community to hear real-life war stories, cautionary tales from the trenches of divorce. But I won't leave you with just the horror stories. The experts will break down exactly what went wrong and, more importantly, how you can avoid making the same mistakes. Whether you're in the early stages of separation, deep in the process, or supporting someone through it, we are here to help you move forward with clarity, confidence, and fewer regrets. I'm your host, Lori Hawkins, and I am a local expert in divorce real estate. I am so excited to be sharing these incredible professionals with you. Let's dive in. I am so thrilled today to have Dan Lewis with us. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good, really good. It's good to see you. I was trying to think back on how exactly we know each other because I can't remember. I know it was another attorney. I can't remember who that introduced us, but I do remember the first day I met you. I remember having lunch with you and some other attorneys in your office, and I was just very impressed with you right off the bat. So I'm excited that you're here today doing this with me. Okay, tell me who you work for. Tell me the different areas that you do, and then maybe even the counties that you are more than likely to service as an attorney.
Sure. Well, first, thanks so much for having me. And I
Yeah,
remember meeting you two way back when. I'm excited to be here. So, let me
good.
tell you a little bit about myself. I am a family law attorney and mediator, and I have been a family law attorney for almost 20 years. I started in the Washington, D.C. area, and I have been practicing law in North Carolina since 2012. I am a partner at Tin, Fulton, Walker, and Owen. I represent clients in family law matters as well as criminal defense and constitutional issues, civil rights, things like that. I predominantly practice in Mecklenburg County. Next in line would probably be Iredell County, as you tend to have. I tend to have clients from maybe Mooresville area, which is in Iredell County cases. But I also will represent clients in surrounding counties of Charlotte as well. And so family law for me is divorce, asset and debt division, known as equitable distribution, alimony and child support issues, child custody. And I also represent people in various domestic violence matters. I don't handle abuse and neglect or adoption cases.
Okay. Well, now you mentioned an attorney and mediator. What's the difference between those two?
So as an attorney, I'm an advocate for clients. I represent clients in court, in litigation cases, but I also resolve the vast majority of my cases for clients outside of court.
Mm-hmm.
An advocate in negotiation or arbitration, which is kind of a private court proceeding, and then as an advocate in mediation, negotiation, things like that. So where I'm representing a client and their interests to achieve their goals. As a mediator, which I've been certified in North Carolina since 2015, I act as a neutral. So my client, I like to say, is trying to get a settlement, but I am trying to help people resolve their disputes outside the courtroom by going back and forth to see where they can kind of come toward the middle, so playing the middle ground of a resolution that they can live with. And I represent and I serve as a mediator both for court-appointed cases, but also as a private mediator when attorneys will reach out to me to represent, to be the mediator. And I also will mediate for people who don't have attorneys, pro se parties. And
Oh,
then
really?
so then also as an attorney, I'm also a certified collaborative divorce attorney. So that means collaborative divorce is a means of resolving disputes outside of the courtroom through a series of meetings with attorneys and their clients and maybe third-party professionals to assist them resolve disputes. The difference between that and mediation being that there is no neutral third party who is trying to get proposals and counter proposals between the two, but to work together as a group in good faith to share information and to share settlement options about what might be best for the dissolution of their family, where they sign an agreement that says, we're not going to go to court. We are going to work together in this process. So I'm a huge advocate for collaborative divorce. And for 2025, I'm the president of the Charlotte Collaborative Divorce Professionals, which is a nonprofit made up of various professionals in and around the Charlotte area who are specially trained for this purpose.
Right. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of collaborative law too. I actually went, even though I'm not an attorney and do not profess to be one, I actually went through the training too because I wanted to learn more about it. I always think anything that is going to give the family unit more decision-making power and not turn it over to a judge to make decisions, especially when children are concerned. I'm definitely for that. So yeah, that's great. So let me, just for anybody listening to this, just to make sure I understand and they understand, you would not be an attorney for someone and do the mediation. Is that correct? You're either one or the other for a couple or for an individual. For an individual.
That's correct. As part of our ethical requirements for our license to be attorneys, as an attorney, you can only represent one party, and then the other party is adverse or against them. And as a mediator, you're not representing either one of the parties. Okay. So I can do one or the other, but I can't do both.
Okay. Well, I loved the information you gave us. I always ask for a fun fact because I always like to see and for people to get to know you outside of this. And I know that you have a little 5-year-old little girl. And I read that you like to do crafts. Are you one of the dads that have tea parties and do all of that fun stuff with your 5-year-old little girl?
Well, we'll do an occasional tea party, but we like going to various stores and finding various craft projects and then bringing them home and doing them, whether it's clay or painting or drawing or putting together various things with, whatever we can find around the house.
Yeah.
Bring glue and things like that. So we like to do those things together.
And you have gotten into the pickleball craze, huh?
I have. I grew up as a very competitive tennis player. Boy and teen, and still play tennis, but I live very close to tennis courts and there's a local group that plays pickleball, so I figured I would throw my hat in and see how much I like it. And I do, and I like it. I prefer tennis, but I do like playing pickleball.
My daughter is trying to draw me in, and it really does. It looks like a lot of fun and good exercise. I just see me winding up in an emergency room, and I'm like, I don't know if it's worth it to me, but anyway, it looks like it's a lot of fun. Okay, let's jump into the meats and potato of the podcast, dodging divorce disasters. Is there a case that you had that just kind of was crazy? It was just kind of crazy. And how you could perhaps offer advice or tips to anyone listening so that they could actually dodge this divorce disaster?
So sure, with almost 20 years of practicing solely family law, I never like to say that I've seen it all because you know what phone call or email you get 5 minutes later with something new. But I thought about that question a lot, and I have a few different examples. The first one, and not necessarily that big of a deal, but people like to fight, or they're brought into a fight and they have to deal with it. A fight or an argument when you're dealing with separation and divorce. I had one case that involved some very wealthy clients They had a lot of different assets and not a lot of debt. And they found themselves fighting over paper towel rolls. So a supply closet in their very nice multi-million dollar home that had, various cleaning supplies and paper products. And they were arguing over who's going to get the paper towel rolls. And obviously that's small potatoes of everything that we were talking about. It wasn't a memento or something that was very special to them per se. The takeaway from that is, dodge by not fighting these small petty issues. You're paying lawyers, presumably, an awful lot of money. The last thing you want to do is spend that money on things that really are of no importance or very little importance, certainly paper towel rolls. But that extends beyond that to furniture and furnishings. People will say, oh, well, we bought this dining room set 10 years ago and it was expensive, whatever that means for them. Well, I've had to hire personal property appraisers that you pay by the hour and you have the lawyers kind of shepherding them through, only to find out that the actual fair market value today, that many years later, is so heavily discounted. Now, that's not to say that the cost to replace those items when one person moves out and needs to have another dining room set, that there's a cost associated with that. But it's best to try to come to an agreement. Maybe it's in your head, what some things are worth or what you don't want the hassle of having to replace. Televisions are an example as well. Those decrease in value significantly. Every year prices drop, technology improves. Some people aren't really interested in learning about technology and what is the greatest, and they would just rather have the older TV. Fine.
Right.
So that's kind of one of the takeaways. Don't argue or try not to argue as much about things that are not as important for whatever reason. They're not as important financially or otherwise. I encourage people to prioritize their goals and focus on trying to achieve those goals by and in turn putting those other things aside or lower down on the list.
That is great advice. That is so good. I know I was written into a court order one time, and the attorney mentioned to me when she called me to say, hey, this is what's going on. They were fighting over mason jars. And it's hard, but emotion, and this better than I do, emotions are running so close to the surface that things that would not upset you in normal life become this monster during a divorce setting. I mean, I always say that I meet the nicest people at the worst times of their lives. And and honestly, with me being transitional, I don't ever really get to know the real person because I'm in and out selling the house and that's all I do. That is really, really good advice.
But so speaking of emotions running high, here's my next one. And it's kind of more general, but I've seen it time and time again. And that is about children. So children are most of the time very hurt by this and by their parents separating and divorcing, of course. And when emotions are running high, parents are less aware of what they're exposing their kids to. The best of intentioned parents, they don't always realize, even when they're not going through issues like separation, divorce, they discount what children hear and see, what they observe, body language, maybe what is heard within their earshot to someone you say something to on the phone. So even if you're the best parent, those things happen. And it's hard when emotions are running so high to be as present or as aware of what your kids are being exposed to and hiding everything from your kids. So the bullet to dodge is be careful of that, be mindful of that, and certainly don't weaponize your children. Don't bring your children into your disagreements or feelings at that time for the other parent. And the advice that I would give is seek the advice of a parenting coach or therapist. Find out what is the best way, what's the most developmentally appropriate way to talk to your kids, both together as parents about what's happening, get on the same page, but also to how to best deal with when your kids come to with questions like, when I was at mom's house, this happened, and how are you going to respond and react to that in that
Right.
setting where you don't have the benefit of being able to take a breath because they're right in front of your face. So, in addition to that, it's how do I co-parent? How do I go from being in one house and being able to juggle life, including parenting, to doing that on my own with that other? I don't have the extra set of hands or person, a parent to take over or to
Yeah.
certain things. There are many very well respected, reputable divorce coaches, parenting therapists in town in the greater Charlotte area who can give you that advice and information, cost much less than that of an attorney. And really it's hard. You don't get a chance to make another impression. Everything that you do can impact your kids, and whether you're in
That is true.
divorce or situation or not. So get yourself equipped to be able to handle that. No one's going to fault you for that. In fact, I think most people, including judges, would say that parent is really trying to act in the child's best interest and trying to do right by them, and good for them for doing that.
Right. I just cannot tell you how much I have learned being in this divorce. I'm divorced, and looking back, I did not handle things well. Speaking to so many of you guys, speaking to divorce coaches, interviewing them for this same podcast. I mean, even financially with my settlement, even talking to CDFAs and that type of thing. I wish I had had all of this knowledge at that time. But as I mentioned before, I'm very much an advocate for children, which is one reason as a CDRE, I won't put a for sale sign in the front yard until I have confirmed that the parents have told the children that the house is going to be put on the market, because they don't think, because they have so many decisions and so many worries coming at them at one time, that a lot of times they may just overlook that they haven't told the child, or they think it's not going to be that much, of a difference, or they assume, well, we're getting a divorce. Of course they know we're not going to stay in this big old house, or they know I can't afford this house. I'm going to have to get rid of it. And I just believe that the children are already going through enough that I don't want them getting off a school bus and seeing a for sale sign in the front yard thinking, okay, mom and dad is already divorcing, and now my one safe place is being taken away from me. So all of that is such great information. Yeah.
I think that's a very good point. It's really important for parents to get on the same page, work together, even though they don't like each other in that time, to try to insulate your kids as much as possible, because emotional scars can run deep, and you're showing your kids by your behavior, your example about what it means to be an adult, what it means to dissolve a relationship, and they carry that with them.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more.
Okay. Yeah. No, this is great.
Example.
This is great information.
So it's kind of egregious, but earlier on in my career, represented a mom who had 3 kids. She had had an affair throughout her marriage. She had a relationship with this person before she got married to somebody else. And she continued that relationship all through her marriage, up through her separation and divorce. And the husband and the wife had 3 kids during their marriage. The youngest one was fathered by the boyfriend. Then this husband and wife did divorce, and my client did go on to marry the boyfriend. But the father of the 3 children, he didn't know, obviously, that this was happening. And that's pretty extreme. We don't typically see a relationship, an extramarital
That's
relationship.
a long time to keep a secret, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. So the kind of takeaways from that, of which there are many, is how well do I know my spouse? How strong is your relationship? Did you go to premarital counseling? Did you talk about how our marriage is going to be? How are we going to be as parents? What's our um, relationship going to be like for communicating, for handling arguments? How are we going to manage money? What visibility and control will each of us have regarding those things? And obviously, also, if you question paternity, hopefully you don't, but there are qualified testing labs for that. But it's really understand what you're getting into. Marriage is not only a sovereign and solemn vows, but it's a relationship. You don't get to have another shot at those years of your life. You're always getting older, right? So how well do you know that person, and are you really prepared and equipped for that relationship? I mean, I'm kind of hurting my professional life by saying that, but I would rather have more people aware of what's going on and have visibility and insight and trust than
Mhm.
those who don't.
Right. No, I completely agree. And that's great advice too. When I first got into divorce real estate, I was almost kind of hesitant because I am very much pro marriage. Even though I'm divorced, I'm very much pro marriage. And I didn't want anyone to ever think, I would seek out or help divide a marriage just to sell a house. Of course, I would never do that. And even as a sponsor of Second Saturday, which you've been kind enough to be a presenter, that's a divorce workshop for women in the Lake Norman area, other areas too, but I'm the sponsor with one of the Lake Norman area. And I was even hesitant with that too, because, Second Saturday does not promote divorce. It is simply there for educational reasons to help you make better informed decisions if you're going to be going, through this. So I know exactly what you're saying. There's a couple. Go ahead.
That's that's a great workshop, and I'm glad to have presented and look forward to presenting
Yeah.
this year. What I say to people, I have a lot of consultations with people who, they're not necessarily dead set on doing this, or they really need some advice and information. They need to feel empowered, and they haven't been told by their spouse that this is over. Maybe some of them have tried couples counseling, and maybe they have not. And I tell people, while I'm a divorce lawyer, I'm not trying to end marriages.
Right.
And I always bring up, if they have not tried counseling, to try to do that. And
Right.
I tell them that it's hard to straddle that fence, like one foot in the bucket of counseling and the other in the bucket of working with a divorce lawyer, like behind the scenes or kind of gearing up for whatever might take place. Go all in. Try that if you think it's something that's salvageable to work on, which may require you to work on things on your own as well, not just
Right.
on with the relationship.
Right. Let me ask you about a couple things that I'd like for you to cover before we wind up. One, I know you have some, in fact, a lot of experience in litigation. Now, once again, for anyone that may be listening to this that does not understand all the terminology, I mean, between collaborative and mediation and litigation and, arbitration, I mean, there's a lot of shuns in there that people are like, what is all this stuff? You do not have to go straight to litigation. In fact, some people, you don't even have to step inside a courtroom, right? If you can go through mediation and get everything squared away and everyone is in agreement with things, you do not have to go to litigation. Is that true or false?
Well, that's true, but it's not just for mediation. People are free to resolve their legal issues in any manner in which they choose. And so there's kind of a spectrum of options. You can do it yourself, but you never know how valid that document is that you find online. Does it conform to North Carolina's laws? You should be very aware of that. Is it detailed? Does it provide for what you actually need? And have you gotten at least some advice from an attorney who practices in that area to avoid pitfalls? But through negotiating, or you just talk to your spouse and go to one of you hires a lawyer and says, this is what we agree on, can you draft it up? Or going to mediation or collaborative law or in arbitration, that private trial, private judge that you pay for. Those are all ways to resolve disputes outside of the courtroom. Mediation is the most kind of well known, but I always ask people, what do they think it means, to make sure that they understand what it means.
Right.
Because the law says that if you have a lawsuit, a claim in court, litigation, that's what those buzzwords mean, you're required by law for custody claims to go to mediation, and you're required in asset debt distribution, or what's called equitable distribution, to go to mediation. Before you can proceed to trial on those two issues, you have to go to mediation. So that's why it's very well known. But you don't have to go to court for anything, except that in order to get a divorce in North Carolina, a judge needs to sign that divorce decree or judgment of divorce. You can't just say you're divorced. But you don't have to physically go to a courtroom. It can be paper driven. A lot of things now in North Carolina, with more and more counties coming online at various intervals, everything's electronically filed. So you don't even have to go to the courthouse to give a piece of paper or something and give them a check for your filing fee.
So does the person have to show, like if the judge is going to sign the decree, do they have to physically be in the courtroom to do that? Do both parties have to be in the courtroom to do that?
No, they don't. They don't have to do that at all. Only if you need a court order do you need to present something to a judge and to have a lawsuit or initiate a case. So
Okay.
all of your issues settle and all you have is the divorce, then it's just the divorce order or decree that you would need. If you need to transfer portions of a retirement from one party to another via what's called a qualified domestic relations order or quadra, that also, because it has the word order in it, you need to have a judge sign that and have that stamped by the clerk. And oftentimes custody and child support issues are settled via what's called a consent order, meaning the parties sign their names to it, meaning we consent to these terms, but a judge signs that too. But at no point do they have to physically be in the courtroom for those things to be signed and entered.
Okay. That's interesting. All of this e-filing that has come about it's made life better, but on the other hand, it's made, I think, everything very public. Speaking of children, as children get older and things are filed online that you can publicly go on and just look up, and kids can see things that maybe they were too young to understand at one time and can look them up later down the road. So there's always good and bad with technology, right?
And that's true, but it's always been that way. It's now just much more readily accessible.
Right.
Or clicks of your mouse. So
Right.
in North Carolina, records in family law cases are not sealed from the public. So even if there isn't electronic filing in that jurisdiction, anyone can go to a courthouse, go to the civil file room, and get a copy of that file and see everything that has been filed. And they always have been able to do that. It's just now much easier to do with a couple clicks of a mouse.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's good to know. So you can kind of, with your litigation skills and experience, you can kind of take people from one end of the spectrum, honestly, to the other end. Whatever they may run up against, it may start out in one slot, and if it, maybe to someone's chagrin, it winds up needing to be going to court. You do have the experience there to be able to lead them through the whole process.
I do. I certainly prefer to resolve cases outside of court. And sometimes lawsuits are filed and then cases settle. The court system is designed to try to get people to settle through a number of different ways. But yeah, I also think that having a strong litigation background enables me to be able to foresee what's going on down the road.
Right.
No one has a crystal ball, but
Right.
I can see that maybe because I've seen that before, and it helps me guide my clients in what they should do and why I think they should do it, although they get to make the decisions for themselves.
Exactly.
They control the objectives of their representation when they work with me.
Well, this has been so informative. I cannot thank you enough for coming on and just giving such great advice. I am going to put all your contact info at the end of this, but just so you can let people know, where can they find you and get in touch with you if they would like to?
I appreciate it so much. I wanted to just say a couple other things if I
Yeah,
could.
of
Just
course.
to prepare someone who is thinking about going
Yes.
to an attorney. So most of the attorneys in the Charlotte area, they charge for consultations. So you want to make sure you get your money's worth. And you also want to make sure you're prepared to answer your specific questions so that you can try to absorb as much as possible. Sometimes it's like going to a doctor and getting news and you only retain so much. Be prepared to have that very important and what can be an expensive meeting. Take notes or bring a laptop. Sometimes if somebody else is taking notes, ask for a copy of those notes. Bring specific questions. Write them out. Identify concerns, things that you want to make sure you have answered that day. They're not necessarily things that are right in front of your face, but longer term things, fears, things like that. If you have a high level breakdown of your assets and debts, income and expenses, bring those. Bring a year or two of tax returns. You don't have to ask your spouse for those documents beforehand and obviously let them know you're going to go talk to a lawyer. But to the extent that you have access to that information, it would be helpful to see all of that to help give them very detailed and tailored advice to them and not just general things, which they might say, oh, well, I saw that online. I'm not really learning anything new. Well, you've got to give me specifics so that I can give you specific advice and information. If you have prior agreements or court orders, certainly bring those because those will likely dictate the parameters in which you can act or might impact how you might proceed going forward. I don't like to sugarcoat things. I think that people are paying a lot of money, and I'm also from the Northeast, so I'm a little bit more direct than other people. Sometimes I give good and I give bad news, and I wouldn't be doing my job, and it would be a disservice to you if I didn't do that. I'm certainly sensitive to clients' needs and where they are and empathetic to their situation, but I wouldn't be helping them as a professional in the long run if I just agreed with everything that they said and told them everything that they want to hear. There may be other lawyers in town that do that, but I don't do that. I want them to understand their strengths and their weaknesses for everything that they want. And in order to do that, they need to be honest with me.
Totally agree.
When you speak with an attorney, you're establishing an attorney-client relationship. That conversation is privileged, which means that no one can be forced to disclose what happened in that conversation and what information that you shared, unless that was already public knowledge or someone else knew about it. So be fully transparent. Let them know the good and the bad and the ugly so that the attorney knows. I can't tell you how many times I have a hour and a half or 2 hour conversation with someone and we've talked about everything. And in the last 30 seconds, they drop a bomb on me. And that bomb, whatever it might be, that could have an impact on everything that I've already said had I known that fact earlier on. So it's really important to be honest because the last thing that you want is your lawyer to be surprised because then they can't help you, especially in a courtroom where your time to speak and to share information or evidence is so limited. You want to really make the most out of that time. And then a couple last things is it's really easy to get married, and it's much more difficult to get divorced, right? It's sanctioned by the state, like marriage is, but when you build a life with someone for a few years or 30 years, you're going to accumulate assets or debts. You may have children and various responsibilities to each other. I tell people that it's often a marathon and not a sprint. Every couple of years, I may get someone who calls in and wants a consultation and says, my spouse and I, we've talked about everything. Here's a list of dividing everything and who's going to do what with our kids and all of that. would you write it up? And it's very easy. Easy for me, not easy for them, but easy for.
Right. Right.
And I call those cases unicorn cases because they don't happen very often. It is a long process, unfortunately. And I don't mean years and years, hopefully not. And oftentimes litigation can be that way, but it can take longer than you might think. And then lastly is this is a really difficult process. Next to the death of a close friend or family member, this is one of the most trying times on my clients. So I always say to them, you need to take care of yourself. You need to sleep. You need to see your doctor if something's wrong. You need to eat healthy. You need to take care of yourself, especially if you have kids, because you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of them, just like always. But now you're in a heightened state of stress, of
Exactly.
unknown and uncertainty. So take care of yourself is really the best thing. And I'm a huge advocate for therapy. Some people are against it, but I really do recommend it, especially in this time of transition where you're experiencing things that you didn't believe that you were going to experience. You've never encountered them before, maybe. So talking with someone, a therapist who can help you emotionally is much better suited than the divorce lawyer. While, I may be kind of an armchair therapist, that doesn't substitute actual training and experience or licensure of someone
Right.
who does that for a living at a much lower cost than.
Exactly.
So if you can get as centered as possible, or and calm and being able to be receptive to your lawyer, you'll get more out of that relationship with your lawyer by working with a therapist on
I
those.
totally agree. Yeah, no, that is fantastic advice. Every bit of that. Like I said, I wish I'd known you several years ago. But no, that's great advice.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we know each other now, Lori. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, how can they get a hold of you?
They can
Anybody listening?
go to my firm's website. It's tinfulton.com. My bio is on there. You can Google me and see a number of different bios on the Charlotte Collaborative Divorce Professionals website, on LinkedIn. My email address is dlewis, one word, at tinfulton.com. And my office phone number is 704-338-1220.
Perfect. All right. And I will have all of that posted at the end of the podcast too. Once again, thank you. This has been great. A lot of great information, and I'm sure you're going to help a lot of people with this. I appreciate you being on.
Thanks so much for having me, Lori. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Information contained herein is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, please seek an attorney.